for 7:20. Is the date?
We're
I'm
live, by
waiting.
the way.
Oh, sorry.
I will check that in just a second.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I have to get back to the right screen. There we go. Well, here, let's just check. We'll do this, and then I'll just.
I think you just got the date wrong
Did I? But
on
it's not
on YouTube.
Is it not live then?
It's live. Yeah, it's fine. It just says 7:20 instead of 7:27.
27. Okay, there
Yeah,
you go.
I think we're
All
okay.
right. All right. Well, let's start the show then, shall we? You ready? Did
Yeah.
you stretch? Did you
I
stretch? Okay. Okay. Good. All right. Today is, there we go. Hello, people. Ask the Podcast Coach for July 27th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions live. You ready for our new tagline? The home of free podcast stuff. What's the word I'm looking for?
Stuff.
The home of free podcast
Advice?
consulting advice, maybe
Advice.
Something like
Advice.
that.
Yeah.
I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. How are you, Jim?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. It's always good to be here on Ask the Podcast Coach on a Saturday morning. Big thanks to everybody last week, but I did get some feedback that all those voices didn't quite make it a great show. Yeah, it was fun that we had everybody here, but I'm not sure the second half we delivered that much content last week.
The fun thing was running it through Cast Magic and having it go, hey, I need to identify your speakers. And you're like, do you really? Do we really need that? So that took some time.
Yeah.
But it was fun. You know, we've proved that you can have a lot of people on a call, but
but it may be one of those situations. Yeah. Maybe one of those situations like this is the blab thing, right? Where you get all these people talking and then it's maybe not necessarily at the end. You're like, well, okay, we just didn't say many things. I don't know if you take very much away. It was fun. It was entertaining. Let's just put it that way. Maybe not learning, but
the other thing I did that looking back, I'm like, is I ran it through Descript and then applied the studio sound and then didn't listen to it before I published it. And I cranked it down to like 80%. I'm like, that should be good. Because remember, we had some hiss problems. And I was like, that'll fix that. And then it came through and I loved the script, but I was just like, publish and go. And then later I'm listening to it and I'm like, that was it was a little harsh. It was a little too much studio sound.
Yeah.
So it was a little watered out. And the other thing I'm getting used to is Buzzsprout, which is the new home of Ask the Podcast Coach, mixes your file down to mono. And the musician in me is like, maybe I'm going to splurge for the magic mastering, which would put it in stereo.
Do you do it? Do you do it? Like, what do you do that needs stereo? You're not Queen.
What are you talking about, man? We need this in stereo. You know. That guy's got doubling going on. That big giant voice.
Are you swinging, amps and stuff on the microphones? You're not Queen.
Oh my goodness! So it's just weird. Yeah, Randy says it. Come on, man, stereo. Yeah.
Are we gonna do the coffee pour on one side?
We could. Yeah. Yes, it is time because
it is. Yeah, we better do it.
If you want a coffee pour, you want it in stereo, dog.
For sure.
And it would sound like this. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. The beautiful thing about Mark is he is a podcaster. I've used him on many of my pieces of artwork. And does this mean people can't hear me? Yes, are you sure? I don't want to remove me. There we go. You can, this is so, Mark's probably like, can you please work out the technology before you do my thing? But he's awesome. He's going to work with you and really let him do the marketing. Tell him about your show. Let him listen to a couple episodes so he knows what you're going for. And so that you can match your brand with what he's doing. And he's done over 500 artworks for people, and he's just an amazing guy. And you can find him over at podcastbranding.co. tell him that Dave and Jim sent you, and he'll say thanks, because he's very polite. He's Canadian. And I'm just here to tell you, if you look at Ask the Podcast Coach, I'm just off my game today. I really am. I'm just off my game. Podcastbranding.co, podcastbranding.co, podcastbranding.co. It's the place to go. I know. And I'm like, here's that. And then
Hello.
I have a slide called Dan.
Then bring me. Yeah, but it's all right. Big thanks to our good friend. There we go. To our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there. Based on a true story podcast.com. If you haven't caught it yet, I think this week, or it's in the last week, he's in the last days of it. But Dahmer, First Man, and At Eternity's Gate is what is covered on his This Week stories and True Stories this week. You might want to check it out today. He's a great podcaster, good content. If you're a movie geek, you might like it as well. Based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
In fact, Dan gave us a question. At least now I've learned how to show things that have been starred. And he says, question for podcasters who do live shows, is it okay to be not great content for the podcast as long as the content is great for the live show? That's a great question, if I do say so myself. So it was great, like if you think about it, the people that were here live last week, and we saw us all in our glory and, you know, that whole 9 yards, but it wasn't really the greatest content. That's why at the end I'm like, did we deliver value? What say you, Jim Collison? Because on one hand,
well, I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uncle Marv in the chat room. By the way, they're saying I'm super hot and you're a little quiet. Do you have any audio controls on this?
I don't
on this
think
thing?
I do.
Does it, or does it?
Yeah, for the record, kids, we're going back to eCam next week. Everybody's like, no, use this for 4 weeks. I'm like, no, this is a test to see would I recommend this. And I already said, yeah, okay, you got to take some time to get to know this. But I'm like, my goal is not to leave eCam. I love eCam. And as I'm doing this, I'm like, why am I not using eCam this week? Again, nothing against, in fact, I have a meeting with the EV MOOCs people, you know, and I'm like, perfect. If somebody's on a PC, let's go over here. There isn't the separate, you don't get the separate track thing that you get in StreamYard and things like that. So, but it's definitely a cool tool. But I interrupted you. I asked you a question.
No, that's fine. It's good. It's good. It's all the things that are going on here. You know, I don't want to take away from the folks that joined us last week. Like I don't, you know, I didn't. I saw some comments and their Uncle Marv apologized. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And there's great entertainment value. And I think Dan's question is a little tongue in cheek. So, you know, we'll roll with that. Lots of entertainment value, some good learning for us. You know, every Sunday I kind of download with Ed Sullivan. We get together and have a conversation, and we were talking about it. And lots of value for us and figuring some things out, and the audience gets to see it. I'm not sure in an audio podcast standpoint, it was great for them. You get to the end and it's just a whole bunch of voices, like you say, talking, and we're trying to figure stuff. Watching the video, maybe, but I don't know if everybody watches video after the fact that way. They're usually coming to it for a reason to find something out or to learn something quickly. So entertainment, I think, is what I'm going to put that under the. I'm going to put that under the you know, the label of entertainment. Would we want to necessarily do that every week? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah,
I've turned you down. I've turned me up a little bit, at least on my Roadcaster. We're even now. But what it is like the Foo Fighters do this a lot. They'll bring a fan up on stage. I don't think they do it every show, but like one that's real famous on YouTube is there was a guy that Dave Grohl just called Kiss Guy because he had Kiss makeup on. And he was holding up a sign like, can I play Monkey Wrench or something like that? And so when they got to that song, they brought him up. He's like, what's up, Kiss Guy? And he's like, can you, do you know this song? And he gives him his guitar, and the guy starts playing. It's like, man, this guy's pretty good. And the guy got to play with the Foo Fighters. So you make an event at that point. It's like, it's not the norm. You're like, hey, I was there when Kiss Guy was there. And so, I don't know, not to inflate it, but we might be sitting around 3 years from now at, Podfest going, remember that time when we had 12 people in the room?
Well, certainly, as we think about recommendations, you are working through all of those, bringing folks in. Folks could see that if you were going to do a show like that where you wanted to bring a bunch of people in, it'd be valuable to see it from that perspective. So, not that there's no value, and not that it wasn't fun. I had a ton of fun doing it. The question was on the backside, does it make the best podcast? Probably not. It was probably, most people are like, well, okay, well, that was interesting. So that's not, by the way, that's not right or wrong. That's just what is in that sense. Like I said, I don't know if we would want to necessarily do that every single week. I don't know, unless that's the podcast. Like,
I'm going to say if that was the thing,
if that's what you're
and
doing, yeah.
I may be louder now. I don't remember turning it on, but auto
Chat room,
volume.
how do we sound? Are we sound all right?
Well, it'll take them 30 seconds to hear this
Yeah.
new one.
Well, John says volume's better, so I think
Okay.
we're good. Yeah, I think we're good.
Because I turned off the.
Did you do that setting on the Roadcaster? Is that where you made the changes?
No,
or
I
what?
made the change in EV Mooks. I went
Oh,
in
okay.
and went into my settings and it said auto gain, and I'm like, no, we don't want that. We don't need no stinking auto gain. So there we go.
Now they say you could still be a little bit louder.
Still be all right. Well, I am going into the Roadcaster and I'm boosting up my. I was at 50. I'm now at 60 of my what you call it, and now I'm messing up my noise gate because I can hear me breathe. And oh my gosh, breathing! People will tune out immediately if they hear me breathe. I'm a robot. I don't breathe.
There we go. Jody says much better.
Okay, awesome, very cool. So, I do want to mention. And I'm not getting, well, I guess if you use my affiliate link, if I put one in, but I'm listening to The Audience is Listening by the one and only Tom Webster. And it could have been called, it's a little guide to building a big podcast. And it could have been called Your Baby is Ugly, because a lot of it is just like, hey, the reason your show isn't growing is because you haven't really figured out who your audience is. And there's so many bumper stickers because his wife is Tamsin, who it's something about Red Thread. I forget the name of her book, but it's all about really knowing your audience. So I'm like, what a dynamic duo these two are. And so I'm about 3/4 of the way through chapter 2. And it's weird because a little bit like the book Platform, I used to listen to that once a year or read if you so choose, because it's just going back to the basics of, this is what good content is. This is what wow content is. And this is kind of, again, first 2 chapters in, but I've already made 3 bookmarks where I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's another good one. And so he was talking about, and it was kind of funny how sometimes there are people that are popular that you just kind of, I'll give you an example one. I don't get Lou Reed. I just do not get. To me, I'm like, oh, and when I watch documentaries, I'm like, oh, he was amazing because he was out of his mind on smack. Like he's untalented. Oh, now he's an untalented junkie. Oh, okay. And besides Take a Walk on the Wild Side, I just don't get Lou Reed. And he said, there are people like that you go, I just don't get it. And he said, one popular one is Bon Jovi. And so and again, if you know me, if you get me thinking, I'm like, that's a good thing. So I actually had to stop the book because I kept distracting myself. Like, why is Bon Jovi popular? And it dawned on me, number one, do you have Hulu, Jim?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the docuseries on Bon Jovi?
No, I haven't watched it.
It is the world's longest trailer ever. Look, this is where kind of having a toe in marketing, about halfway through you go, oh, I get what this is. This is because the whole thing is like, will he sing again?
Yeah.
Is his voice going to end? Like, of course it is. And he's going to probably do one last tour.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the one that you'll have to buy tickets to. But the first episode is like, look, here's John. He's cute. He's really cute. Oh, look, here's John on a bus. Here's John smiling with a hat. Look, here's John smiling with sunglasses. And I'm like, okay, so that'll bring in the female, in theory. Number 2, they brought in a really good guitar player because, like, where are the dudes at? We need some dudes. So they brought in Richie Sambora, and their first 2 albums were actually almost hard rock. And then the other thing is that he just worked his ass off. If you watch that docuseries, they were just touring nonstop. But I went and so this is what I'm doing this morning. I'm researching Bon Jovi lyrics. And there was, and because I mean, when I was in my 20s, he was really popular. But now this is not Shakespeare, Jim. But let me read to you some lyrics, and I'm going to pull this into podcasting in a second. There's a song called "Shot Through the Heart," which number one shows how John likes to repurpose things, because that was also whatever, "You Give Love a Bad Name." That's the first line of that song. But this was off the first album, and it said, "Would you be content to see me crying after all those little games you put me through? After all I've done for you, you're lying. Wouldn't it be nice to tell the truth? Didn't somebody say you're going to take a fall? I gave you everything, and now here's the curtain call, and I'm shot through the heart. As I lay there alone in the dark, through the heart, it's all part of the game that we call love." Now, picture that through the ears of a 13-year-old girl.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, so you write relatable lyrics, which is knowing who your audience is. And I went, oh my God, you know what Bon Jovi is? He's Taylor Swift before there was Taylor Swift.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they all are.
Yeah. And so, and then
Foreigner. I want to know what love is.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, come on. There's tons of breakup songs and they're all popular because we all break up, right? And we're all sad during those breakup times. We need the music to get us through it. Oh yeah. No, they're definitely, that's definitely, but Bon Jovi had a lot of things going for it. I mean, the looks helped, right? And of course, there's a lot of marketing that we don't see when it comes to local events and getting things and getting invited onto other people's programs and doing some of those kinds of things. So, and then there's word of mouth, and then there's a little bit of luck. Yeah. There's
always a little bit of luck. Well, the other thing was, because this is back for backing tracks, I've seen him twice. He was on a Monsters of Rock tour, literally at the end of my street, with Van Halen and I think the Scorpions and a bunch of other people. The guy's got talent. The band is talented, and he's got the whole Bruce Springsteen telling stories in between songs, and stories always work. So that's always fun.
Yeah.
But it was just but really the bottom line is, and this is what Tom is kind of saying, make the podcast your audience wants to listen to. And I know that's kind of a duh, but sometimes we make the podcast that we want to listen to, and then we hope there are other people like us.
Well, I mean, certainly there are ways of making a podcast, like doing it, saying, okay, everybody, I need to design it and do it this way because that's what's popular. Listen, every single true crime podcast is that way. Every single one of them. They all heard Serial, and then they all tried to recreate Serial. I've been listening to the Wall Street Journal daily. They do a twice daily podcast, 15 minutes as a recap of the news. They just ripped off NPR. I mean, it could not be more formulaic. Of they'll do a news segment, and then there's a little fancy music in between, and then they move on to the next thing, right? It's a formula. You can do a formula podcast, and if you the sweet spot would be to do a formulaic podcast where you like doing the formula, because you do those kinds of things long enough, and if you don't like them, you start resenting them, and then you start delaying, like I don't want to work on this podcast. Now, if you're getting paid to do it, that adds a whole new set of motivations to it. Like, there are things I would never do at work, but I get paid to do them. So I am motivated because they pay me to do those things. But so I think if you're doing this, if this is your gig and you're doing this and you want to follow a formula, and if you don't like the formula, I'm not sure you're going to last very long doing it. And especially if it's not pulling the numbers or the money or whatever it is that you think it should be pulling, you're just going to burn out on it. You're like, this is dumb. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So that I just think there's some caveats in there of, do you really, if you like it, you'll last longer, I think.
Yeah. Craig says, if you bend too much, to please your audience, then you might snap. Yeah. It's got to be something you want to do. And that's, kind of the thing where it's kind of tough. I mean, we've had people give us feedback on this show, and we're like, "Oh, that's a great suggestion." Yeah, we're not going to do it because that's not what we do here. John Jamango said he saw Bon Jovi back in 1987 in New Jersey. We're from New Jersey, yay! So so that's always fun.
Well, and those bands, all those '80s bands did tons of work in the late '70s or early '80s on the road to play at festivals and bars and some of those kinds of things, right? And some of them, you think 6, 7, 8 years of every night at a bar playing for 15 people. And maybe that's where your podcast is now. Maybe you're playing in the bar, right? I mean, you're getting the date, you're getting your sets down, you're getting your transitions down, you're getting things figured out, you're learning how the business works, you're trying to figure out where your sweet spot is. You could just be playing at the bar, and what's ahead could still be coming. Just, I know this, if you quit, it won't happen. I can guarantee you. Guarantee. The only thing in life I can guarantee. If you quit, it won't happen.
Well, I'm working on my next episode for the School of Podcasting, and this will be the last one where the topic is me. But it's basically a really long because of my podcast story. My last episode was how I went from this technology to this technology to this technology, and this one is how the relationships, how I met this guy who introduced me to Adam Curry, who put me into this spot, which led to the new Media Expo, which led to kind of things. So just pointing out that it's content, but it really, some of the magic power of growing your podcast is getting to know other people. And I totally lost my train of thought. It was here, and then it was...
Well, here, you keep thinking. I think, and I'll talk, and then I'll see your face when you remember it. I think sometimes we think that success is if we work hard enough, we'll have success. Now, it depends on how you define success. But let's just say being popular or famous, or your podcast, you can live off the podcast money that you make. Let's just consider that success. We think if we work hard enough, that's a guarantee, and it just isn't, right? Sometimes it's just not our time, right? Sometimes it's just not the place. And so I think, but you still got to try it. You still got to do it. It just doesn't. None of that stuff's. I mean, in any business, this is the way. Open a new restaurant. You can work as hard as you want, and it still may not work, right?
Yeah. My point was I didn't quit because there are a lot of people like Michael Gohagan did Grape Radio, and Grape Radio was so popular at the time because it was again where everybody else is just doing, hey, we're not radio. Like, he really tried to put together a tight panel talking about wine, et cetera, and it ended up being, it was the first thing that kind of jumped out of the iPod because I forget what airline, but some airline made it available to listen to on the plane. We're like, holy cow, which is great. And then Michael got tired of talking about wine, and the last I heard, he's like a park ranger now or something like that, doing something he loves. And so it's one thing, because you could say, well, Dave, you were lucky. I think I was probably one of the first 100 podcasters, maybe one of the first 50. It was early. So yeah, I got, first mover advantage, but I didn't quit. I'm still talking about podcasting. So there is something to luck, but I always talk about Cliff Ravenscraft, who's a friend of mine, a good guy, and he did a show about Lost. And then the actual CBS radio show started a podcast about the show Lost. And when people searched for Lost podcast, they found Cliff because he had a little more SEO going than he did. And so you could look at Cliff and go, oh man, that was a bunch of luck. Yeah, but he held the audience. It's one thing to get the audience. It's another one to keep them. And that is another point that's in Tom's book. It's like, yeah, you can buy ads, you can do all this stuff, but if you're not making the show that your audience wants to hear, they're going to give you a shot. And then, swipe left and you're gone. So it's got me thinking. Like I say, I'm only into chapter 2 of it.
I think I'd add one more thing to that I also think interest doesn't last forever.
No.
Like we get a season of this, and I think, it's very, very rare. And maybe you have to, if you look at shows like The Simpsons, that is way to the end of exception instead of the rule, right? That has been allowed to go on for an ever and ever. I don't know, they've 85 seasons maybe of that now at this point. And you got to think why. And it's a show like The Simpsons has transcended generations.
Yeah.
Like it's the early kids that were watching this behind their parents' back because their parents in the 80s wouldn't let them watch it because it had controversial things in it. Right?
Well, Bart Simpson said,
yeah.
Was it Eat My Shorts or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So now they're adults and their kids are watching it, right? That's such an exception. Very few things like that. Most stuff has a comes and goes. My daughter is a big Hank Green fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And listen, Hank's been through some stuff.
Yeah.
And not only personally in his life, but also in his career. He has done a bunch of these things that, I think even the work that he did on SciShow was it changes, it morphs, it grows, it ends at some point. And I think that's another bit of this is oftentimes we just have seasons where we do these things. It works for a while and then maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time to do something different.
Well, it's funny how if you find old stuff like it was Dave Chappelle was on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is now releasing stuff on YouTube because he wasn't allowed to.
Oh yeah, older stuff.
That's older stuff, and it's him and Dave Chappelle. And I'm not I don't hate Joe Rogan. I'm just like most of the time I'm just in my head. I'm like, why didn't you edit this out? Mm-hmm. But it's Dave Chappelle who is like one of my heroes. And he said they were talking about how Eddie Murphy is embarrassed by some of the stuff he said in some of his earlier stuff. And Dave Chappelle said, I look at stand-up from years ago like a photograph. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, look at him, man. Like, well, that's what was going on at the time, right? Bell bottoms and whatever, or if it's in the 80s, you've got the spiked hair or whatever. It's like that was going on at the time, and it was acceptable at the time to dress that way. And he goes, so if somebody's making a joke that you can't tell today, he goes, I don't hold them to today's standard because that's today's standard. That standard. Like, he goes, I kind of look at it like, wow, look what we were able to do back then that we can't do now. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting when you think about just people like what's popular now may not be popular in 5 years. Dan Lefebvre is on fire in the chat room here. Says the flip of that is true. Jim's point. Sometimes there's an element of luck. Some people don't work super hard to get that. And then he said, but if you find success, and either by hard work or luck or both, to keep success, you must be able to adapt to the change. To that I say, that's some Shakespeare right there, my friend. That's it is. It's and well Jody said.
Yeah, well said.
Jody said it's not easy. Travis, what's his name? The football player, Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Said podcasting is harder than football.
Yeah. Got really easy for them for a while though. Like they could just get on and do during this Taylor Swift phase. My daughter listens to that show. Like it's about football. She doesn't give two anything about football. And so for a moment it got easy for them. They could just get in there and do their thing. So
and Randy says, and for the record, Randy, I just realized Randy deserves a big shout out. And being that we're 28 minutes in, you'll get that next week. I was scrambling this morning trying to find out where the link is to the YouTube thing to update it. It was, again, we're going back to Ecamm next week, kids. And I'm like, I want to be comfortable. But he says, value is in the eye of the beholder. I thought last week was amazing because it showed the power of collaboration with others. To me, that's not valuable. So, yep, it's one man's trash is another man's treasure or whatever. Right. So, and Brad Miller says, hello from Indy. And he is, there's not too many of these going these days. He is doing Pod Indy, will be in November 9th in Indianapolis. And I say that because I noticed that Joe Pardo, who did Indie PodCon or something like that. He always called it Philadelphia. It was really New Jersey. New Jersey! It's the theme today. And he is not doing that this year. And I get the feeling Joe just doesn't want to do it anymore. The last one I went to was not well attended. And I was to the point where I'm like, look, I love these things, but I'm not driving, 7
Yeah.
hours to
Yeah.
meet 8 people or something like that. So,
Hey, can I change the subject real fast?
you can change the
Would that
subject,
be
my
okay?
friend.
Can I get personal real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I've already told you this, but some of the audience knows back in 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with an enlarged prostate and then had surgery back in December they removed 70% of that. I've had several biopsies, had an MRI a couple years ago that showed a shadow. Had an MRI on Tuesday that was completely clear. So that's good news. You're never totally out of the woods, but just kind of nice to be clear for now. I'll probably have to do an MRI again 3 to 5 years just to kind of stay on top of it to make sure that prostate cancer is not there. But you showed the cancer, the podcaster a second ago that had cancer, and I thought, what a relief it is. You don't realize how much of a relief it is until you're there. It's kind of one of those things you're like, oh man, I was worrying about that a lot. And to get that call on Thursday and say, hey, it's clear for now, or you're back to annual physicals and blood work was a huge relief. I'll just remind you, gentlemen, get your annual physicals, get your blood work done, stay on top of those things. It was due to some of that, I have always been very diligent to get my physicals, and and as I started having some of those symptoms, I talked to my doctor about it, and then we scheduled me some with the urologist, and then we spent some time. There's some poking and some prodding, and it's very uncomfortable at times, but very, very worth it. And yes, a negative test is a wonderful thing. That's one of those things where you're glad it's negative, right? So, anyways, appreciate you guys, and I know many of you have gone on this journey with me, and appreciate it. And so, just thought I'd give you an update. For now, things are clear. I don't have to get poked and prodded anymore, which is kind of nice. I'm not gonna lie.
There you go. More good news from Dr. Brad Miller. My prostate cancer was deemed clear in March, a year after surgery. So get that test done.
Get your tests done, gentlemen. And ladies, you're not off the hook either. You've got your own. I hear from many of ladies who can't do mammograms. They just are like, I can't do it. It just hurts.
Yeah.
And you got to go in there. I know all those tests are uncomfortable, but make sure you're doing them on a regular basis for sure.
Yeah. Gary says, my dad didn't go. And then when he did, he had colon cancer. So
yeah. And many of these things, the earlier you catch them, the better. It's just it sucks when you have them for sure, but you can catch them sooner than later, and later is a hard business to be in. And so it's important to be vigilant on those. I know it's uncomfortable, but it's way. I'm watching a good friend of mine. He has stage 4. I think it's stage 4, non-Hodgkin's, and he's going. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
And you'd rather catch that a little bit earlier and than you would later. So make sure you're doing all those things.
If you are in that boat, I recommend the website We Have Cancer, which is a podcast by Lee Silverstein, who had stage 4 cancer for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, he ran a very long race, but it caught him eventually. But he was supposed to be dead years before he actually went.
Yeah.
And so,
serious subject. One of the reasons I share it here, I think, and the value or the responsibility is a better word that we have as podcasters, I think, is oftentimes we do influence people, and we have to, I think some of those times you have to use a platform like this to influence people to do things. So get it done.
Absolutely.
Get it scheduled today. I did have at work, I shared this with a friend at work. She went home and shared it with her significant other. Her significant other went in and got checked. He had early signs of prostate cancer. So, and he was never going to get it checked before, right? Now, prostate cancer, it's that one is one that's workable. If it gets out, it's bad, but definitely I'm, you have in your podcast the ability to influence people. If you can do it in a way to encourage them to be healthy, do that for sure.
We do that every week by recommending people not buy a Blue Yeti.
Oh my god!
Friends don't let
watched.
friends buy Blue Yetis.
Listen, I watched the whole Tour de France this year on YouTube, the extended highlights. So every day I'd come home, 30 minutes, watch the video. It's kind of like watching paint dry, but it was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. At the end of that, this is NBC's feed. NBC. At the end of NBC's feed, they show a 25-second clip of a guy in his office. It must have been recorded during COVID. He's got a Blue Yeti in front of him that I'm not sure is on. And he says, we have more videos just like this on our YouTube channel. Subscribe. Boom, he's gone. The video quality is terrible. The audio quality is terrible. The angle is terrible. I was like, and this isn't like
right.
They
It's
just
NBC.
figured this out in COVID. Like this, we've been out of this for a while. Somebody thought, oh, well, this clip will be fine. Dude, you have hundreds of thousands of people watching these videos on YouTube. This is your NBC. Spend a little bit of money and make something that's a little bit better, right?
Well, the funny thing is NBC raised their revenue on their streaming, and now Peacock is only losing $390 million a year. And I was like, they were like, yeah, revenues are up. We're only losing $389 million now. And I'm like, wait, what? Excuse me. Yeah, it's scary. We do have a question for Jim.
Mm-hmm.
When I downloaded a Chrome extension, I keep getting pop-ups telling me to switch from Edge to Chrome, but does it really matter? The extensions are currently working just fine, which means it's time.
And now, oh, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
I like the way he says he's been waiting for this. I like that line. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the Edge versus Chrome and the reminders, the pop-up reminders. Both of them are very aggressive when if your default browser is Edge and you download something from Chrome, it's going to say, hey, wouldn't you like to use Chrome? It's the other way around. If you've been using Chrome and it's your default, Windows will start prompting you, hey, don't you just do you want to make Edge your default browser? There had been some shenanigans going on with Microsoft for a while where even if you set your default browser to Chrome, it would open everything in Edge, even though you said open it in Chrome. Depending on your operating system that you're using, whether you're using Windows 10 or Windows 11, depending on the settings that you have in your browser and the way those are set up, those don't always guarantee things are going to work. Does it matter? No. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. They're both Chromium-based browsers. They're both spying on you. Let's just be really, really clear about this. They are massively spying on you, right? Both are terrible when it comes to allowing not real bad things, but certainly real bad marketing things happening to you. You can go into the settings. This isn't necessarily a tech show, but you can go into the settings and try to turn those reminders off and such. There are some ways to do that. Google that or look on YouTube. There'll be some videos that show you how to do it. Do you need to worry about it? I wouldn't worry about it that much. Is it annoying? Yes. And so do what you can do to get those pop-ups shut off. I'm just here to tell you, if you're on Windows and you're using Chrome, Microsoft's going to hound you, and you may not be able to turn that hounding off. Now, with some of the newer Windows 11 stuff, they're slowly starting to shut some of that stuff down because they're getting so much negative feedback. But could be annoying for a while, and do your best to dig in, find the settings based on the version you have, and you should be able to get that shut off.
Yeah. Thoughts on the Brave browser?
Yeah, so I use Brave. I especially use Brave for YouTube because it blocks all the ads. And so just by default. Now, I say that 2 weeks ago, I did an update. YouTube is doing some things now where they're forcing the ads in at the beginning. So when I click to play the ad, it takes a while it's like it's not instant. And then they throw not a video ad, but they throw a pop-up ad in not a pop-up, but it's an ad. It's a still ad in your browser before the video plays. Is the experience great on YouTube and Brave? Not right now. Now, what will happen is the Brave engineers will figure out what the YouTube engineers are doing, right, and then they'll fix that, I would think. Brave is by nature a very secure browser. They kind of live in this world of security. They by default try to block all the shenanigans that are going on. If you've been in Chrome or you've been in Edge full time for the last couple years, you may get on Brave and things that you used to go to just may not work because you're used to being spied on all the time. Like you don't have any idea how much those browsers are spying on you, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing. They just want to know where you're going and who you are and what you're doing so they can send relevant ads to you, right? So, which is spying. So you may get on Brave and it may you like things that used to work don't, and you're like, oh, this is frustrating. It is also Chromium based, so you can use your extensions like you would in Edge or in Chrome. The only other today in today's world, the only real browser that's not Chromium based for the most part, and that there's a few caveats in there, is Safari. It's they have their own engine doing things, and Apple is actually touting that they're a more secure browser, and it in some cases that might be true. Now they might be spying on you too, so
Yeah.
you know. So the world of browsers, if you want to be anonymous out there, it's hard. I mean, you really got to work at it. So good luck on that. You can pay for some things. Randy Black says Safari for the win. If you're on a Mac and you're using Safari, good luck with StreamYard. Doesn't work. It wants a Chromium-based browser, right? Yeah. Some of those kinds of things. So that may have changed. It's been a while since I've seen that, but the world of browsers is an interesting one. I guess I'll wrap this up by saying, and then AI Goes to College says DuckDuckGo has a browser that's pretty private. There's nothing that's private, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be real clear about this. If you think you're going to be on the internet and be anonymous, that's just not true. There are so many. Listen, if you think your phone isn't spying on you right now, I'm in 5 minutes, I'm going to get an ad for DuckDuckGo off, somewhere in my Facebook feed or in my, you can be completely anonymous if you just don't use anything, but most stuff is spying on you, and it's a lot of work to go in and turn off. I mean, I've even heard of people turning off the microphone app or the microphone access in Facebook. They turn it off in on their iPhone or on Android, and it doesn't like. So privacy is an illusion that we have, right? It's just an illusion. We don't really have any privacy.
Yeah.
There's some things you can do to kind of protect yourself, but just live in a world where most of the time, and it's not in most cases, it's not malicious. They just want to sell you things.
Right. That's all.
They just want to sell you. The most annoying, and I'll end it with this. The most annoying part is when you buy something. So you go to Amazon, you buy something, it places a cookie, and then all those cookies get seen. You buy it, and then it starts showing up in all your ads for the next week or so. That's bad marketing, friends. That is just bad marketing. But there has been, Dave, a big movement, and Google is kind of one of the companies behind this, in this idea of cookies and cookie setting and what's allowed and not allowed. So you may be noticing a lot of sites are throwing up their, hey, will you allow cookies partial, full? You're like, why all of a sudden is this? Because there's been some things going on behind the scenes to give some transparency around these cookies. The problem is it's just giving you more options, and options equal confusion. And so people have never been more confused about their cookie options than there are right now. And then what do? Just accept them all. I don't have time to look through all these cookie things.
That's exactly it.
Right? And we're right back to where we were before, right? So geez. Yeah.
Dan says, for browser-based recording, I found using good old Google Chrome tends to work the best with fewer bugs. So yeah, it's one of those things. If you don't want to use it, fine.
You can go incognito in Chrome.
Yeah,
and that's kind of gives you some. But then, listen, for most people, Dave, browsing a world where your browser doesn't know you. That sounded like a movie thing. Browsing in a world where your browser doesn't know who you are is an awful experience for most people. We are so used to our browser knowing who we are, including if you use a password manager, it's filling in passwords for us. It's setting preferences. It's doing some things. Let's just try it one time. Go completely incognito, get on a VPN, change your IP address, and go completely incognito, and then try to do anything that you normally do. You'll be it for most people. It's frustrating. You're like, why are they asking me all these questions? Well, they don't know who you are. They don't know who you are.
Well, Randy says cookies were great, for maintaining user sessions, but when advertising guys jumped in, jumped the shark, and
marketers, they ruin everything.
They do. And Google has now said they've given up their attempts to eliminate third-party cookies last week. Mm-hmm. The EU was pushing too hard back against them because of the ad companies complaining. As soon as that, and if Apple ever has that VPN where it blocks IP addresses, podcasters are screwed. There goes your stats, like right out the window. So
we need some of those tracking systems, right? We need those things to get the numbers we need to get. And so we're like, track everything. I mean, if I give you an MP3 and I want to know where you quit listening, I have to put something on there that tracks you so I can do that. I mean, by the nature of that technology, it's tracking you in some form or fashion, whether you're on the site and it's progressive streaming, or it would be even worse if you downloaded it and it was tracking you. Not a lot do that, but that would be creepy, right? For sure. But you're agreeing to some form of tracking. It makes it convenient. This is the problem, right? Between security and convenience, makes it super convenient for us to have all those. Whenever I have a technology problem and my technology team goes, "Hey, can you clear your cache in your cookies?" I am like, you're hurting me because now I have to log back into every site. Right now, it doesn't know who I am anymore.
Yeah, DR says the same thing.
Yeah.
And she'll actually go, "Oh yeah, I cleared them," and then she didn't.
Unfortunately, it does fix problems. Like I've done it, and then the problem goes away, and you're like, can you fix your site so I don't have to do that? I don't want to clear my cache on my cookies.
Yeah, I know. Right now, my Chrome is saying there's an error and it isn't syncing, which I really don't care. But to do that, to re-enable the sync, it has to clear everything. And I did that once, and all of a sudden I had to go back and find all my passwords and all sorts of stuff that was, that I either had, I don't know, because I use 1Password for most of my but I just remember there was a lot of stuff that apparently I didn't realize I had saved somewhere, and it was in the browser, and it was making things easier, and now it wasn't. And I was like, oh, note to self, don't do that again. I'm like, it's not the squeeze isn't worth the juice.
No, and remember, you're transmitting an IP address. In most cases, they know who you are from your IP address. Now, some cases your ISP changes that, and so it changes from time to time. But you could use a VPN and mask your IP address on a fairly regular basis if you wanted to. That can cause all its own problems. Oftentimes, a VPN will come in maybe from, like for me, they either hit Kansas City or Denver. So then I go to weather.com and it thinks I'm in Denver.
Right.
So then I got to change the setting, Again, security, convenience, security.
That's it. Yeah. I was at a comedy show. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but I was watching one. And this comedian was talking about this, and he just started shouting sex toys. He's like, if everybody could hold up their phone, please. And he's like, and he just started screaming, big, and so he's like, he goes, wait till you go home, and like Alexa's going to be asking you, would you like this? Should I add that to your bucket or whatever? So
well, and that may not work. Like in that case, some of those words are blacklisted.
Yeah.
So you can't, they won't show up that way. You those kinds of ads, you may have said, hey, you can't serve me those kinds of ads. And sometimes the Facebook policies block them and such like that. But yes, yeah, that's that indeed can happen. We do need, as we're talking about passwords in the chat room, we do need a better solution for passwords. Like even having a central site where all your passwords are stored is a horrible.
Yeah.
I use it. I do this. In fact, I have two that do it. It's terrible. That's the worst. That's one of the worst things to have for security. Now all your passwords can be hacked with one password.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And you know, and the security depends on you and some of the things that you have to do and your security hygiene and some of those kinds of things associated with it. Those are terrible. We've got to come up with a better way of doing passwords than people remembering these. You know, at work, it takes a picture of me and it asks for a PIN, two forms, right? Some or a fingerprint and a PIN, or fingerprint and a card, something you are and something you have, you know, something along those lines. We just, it needs to be better than it is today. We got a long ways to go on that for sure.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I don't want to clear out ever, my awesome supporters, and in theory, it's saying it's trying to connect to your, let's see if I click on, yeah, very interesting. Our awesome supporters, you can be an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. The show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting, where we have awesome courses that'll walk you through step by step. Although everybody and their brother has now updated their software. So for like the next month, I'll be updating Buzzsprout. I'll be updating a bunch of stuff. But you also get one-on-one coaching, and that is unlimited and an amazing community. Use the coupon code COACH and join worry-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And this show runs on Podpage. If you want to try Podpage, use my affiliate link. It's trypodpage.com, or if you want to learn Podpage, go over to learnpodpage.com. Those are free. And then normally we're using Ecamm. Today we're using EV Mux. And I'll be back on Ecamm next week, but that's because I'm on a Mac. So if you're not on a Mac, then go to, EV, let's see, it's supportthishow.com/EVMux, and Mux is MUX. So that's why we're playing with that today. And if you need more Jim Collison, and look, who doesn't want more Jim Collison? Now I can't figure out how to get rid of you. There we go. Go to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And if this show saves you time or saves you money or saves you a headache or just keeps you educated, well, then go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and give back. And with that, it is time for the supporter of the week, which means over to the wheel of names. And with that, we will do a quick spin. And the winner is... he's a lucky guy. The one and only Max Trescott over at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you're a pilot, you got to go check out Max, because I'm not a pilot, and I will tune in every now and then because he's got really interesting stories about plane crashes and weather and all sorts of plane kind of stuff. So thanks for being an awesome supporter. And again, if you would like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com. So awesome today. So I do have actually I have a question. Can you think of any app that you can only use because you're on a PC? The reason I ask is my Dell is getting old, and I was like, I probably should replace that PC. And I was like, what do I use on that? And I was like, the only thing I could think of was an MP3 tag thing, which I have one on Mac. So it's not like...
You can find an equivalent. You can always find an equivalent.
Yeah.
Even if it's Windows only. I don't know of too many apps that are Windows only and not on, the actual app itself, not made for both. I'm sure there are. Sure there are, but you can almost always find some kind of... I run both. Listen, I'm on a Mini now, and then for some of the production, I use a Windows PC. I just don't even see the difference between the two anymore.
Yeah. So Daniel's asking, when I say PC, do I mean personal computer, or do I mean
you mean a Windows box?
I need a Windows machine, yeah. And I was like, if I buy one, it's obviously not going to be the top of the line. It's not going to be the bottom of the line. It'll be the middle of the line, and it's probably not going to be in my office because what I have right now is my left screen is Mac, my right screen is PC, and then I have a tool I use to share one mouse between them, which is pretty good 94% of the time. But there are times that I'm like, wait, hold on, and I shake the mouse and do this. Okay, there we go. And it's just kind of annoying. Dan says 3D Max was always Windows only, which is why I was the only PC guy in a Mac studio for many, many years. Yeah. So I don't think I have anything. Rich Graham says QuickBooks on a PC. See, I use Waves for my accounting, so that's not a thing. Craig from AI Goes to College says, I ran both for a couple months, then disconnected the PC. Now it's a nice stand for my cat.
Yeah. Keeps them warm.
Yeah, otherwise it would be in the closet. Yeah.
Warm.
And
Office used to be terrible on Mac. They did this on purpose. When Microsoft did this on purpose, it was always the Office stuff was always worse. Now with Satya Nadella, that has all changed. His thing was good everywhere. In fact, sometimes better on Mac. So that used to be the case. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, but it's just dawning on me that I'm like, my job, I use my Mac, all my audio podcasting stuff I do on my Mac, and I'm really, what the PC is doing right now, it's running Netflix. Because here's why, on a PC, there is some sort of plugin that allows me to speed up any kind of video. Not Netflix has a built-in. If you're watching online, Netflix has a speed control, but I have a plugin that lets, or an extension, I guess I should say, that I can run on a PC. The Mac won't let me install it because of privacy. So apparently, again, they're spying on me, but I'm like, I don't care. I can watch something at 2x. So that's the only thing I can think of that I can do on a PC that I can't do on a Mac. And I'm just like, it would be nice to have dual screens again. And I'm like, I'm not really using the PC for it.
Ecamm for you would be a big deal.
Yeah, but that's it. I'm like, I can, if I was going PC only, I would lose Ecamm.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm not. I think from this point forward, I'm a Mac guy. The other thing that I don't do a ton of, but it's nice, is the integration. If you are a person that has an iPhone, and in my case, an Apple Watch, they all kind of tie in. It's nice when there are times when it's like, it sends you a code and I can just double click my watch and it's like, oh, you're in. That's you. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. So yeah. Daniel says video speed controller is the Chrome extension I use. I think that might be the one I use, but I just remember something on a Mac. It was saying, wait, this is, it's spying too much on you, basically, whatever it was doing. So, I was just thinking about it because I
like both. I have both, right?
Yeah.
So the podcasting stuff gets done on a Mini, and then I have a pretty powerful gaming Windows box that does a variety of things. I did some crypto stuff on it for a while. But I love having both. I just, it's just handy. And I have a laptop here that runs a screen, but when I need to go other places, I just unplug this from the.
Wrong button.
Oh, there we go.
You were still here, but the fun thing was, see, I need to do this. If I don't know, is right now I am I'm designing a scene because I want to share my screen here in a second.
Yeah.
And I was like, I forgot to turn on let me go backstage and do this so nobody sees what I'm doing.
Yeah. I have an M1. Randy's talking. He says the Mac Mini with the M2 Pro is sweet. Great compliment to my MacBook Air. And yes, indeed, looks like the Mini M4 may be coming out later this year, maybe early next. That will be an upgrade for me for sure. I will be making that jump. I'll trade in my M1. I will get an M4. I think that's going to be where I want to go. Do I need to? No. I think I could probably. The Mini does just great for what I use. For processing video and all those kinds of things. It's fast enough for me. Do I want to stay current with what Apple is doing with their hardware? Yeah, I do. I do a lot. And because I use both Windows and Mac, I don't see. Yeah. The closeout button is on different sides of the left versus right on the. It's British versus American driving is all it really is. But I hardly see any difference between the two anymore.
Well, the other thing I say that is I'm using a Windows keyboard on a Mac.
Oh, sure.
And I've told
sure.
it that the Windows key or the control key, one of them is the command key.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. It kind of is, but there are times when I'm like, wait. And the other thing that drives me nuts
I just buy a Mac keyboard, Dave.
that's what I might do. $99 for a freaking keyboard.
No, they're expensive, but they'll last you. They'll last you literally forever. Although a $20 keyboard will last you forever too, unless you spill something into it. But I would go. My Mac keyboard went bad. I need to replace it as well. I have a Windows on here, and it's okay, but I should just have a Mac keyboard.
Yeah, Randy has a great point. 12 months. No interest using the Apple Card. That's what I did to get my Mac Mini, and then I just don't. Once it was paid off, I'm like, I need to cancel it probably, or just
nice way to do it. No, don't cancel the card. It's helpful on the iPhone. You can sometimes try just chick pay, boom, you're done. You don't have to even get out your wallet.
But that's the other thing that drives me nuts is when I'm looking at my PC, it's Control C is copy. And I just have to move my pinky one key over when I'm on the Mac, and I'm constantly on the PC going Windows C, and I'm like, and then the little option button pops up, and I'm like, that's driving me nuts.
Copy and paste. We talked about this a lot on Home Gadget Geeks when I first started going Mac. Copy and paste is another one of those things that's a little bit different between the two. And so now it's even worse because I'm using Synergy as a keyboard mouse, right, between the two.
Yeah.
So that accentuates the problem even more. So I got to remember, I go on Windows, hit, if I do the Windows key C or Windows key V on the Windows, it's gonna on Mac, it's gonna do it. On Windows, it's gonna pop up the copy paste dialog button. Hey, which one? And it's okay. It's okay. You figure it out.
Yeah. It's so that was, thank you for that. I really don't think I'm going to buy a piece. I just need to I have a lot of files that I've moved from PC to PC to, like, they're all archives, and I just need to throw those in the cloud so I don't have to worry about them.
Yep.
All right. So another quick question here. This was from Reddit. How do you get out of a creative rut? So specifically, if you found yourself having a lack of motivation, or maybe you realize that you've been making content that you just don't feel that passionate about, how do you go about getting back to your roots and enjoying the process of podcasting again? I was like, And that might go back to kind of what you were talking about
in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Like sometimes you just change, and maybe you're just not, it just doesn't, float your boat.
You and I have this conversation about once a year behind the scenes when we're connecting. We're like, is there anything new to say? Like, is there, when we think about podcasting, is there any, we every week we say a variation of the same thing. It's different for us because we love interacting with the chat room. Like, we love, you add as much value, you being the chat room for those who are listening live.
It's our third person.
Yeah, you add as much value to the show as we bring sometimes, and sometimes not, but sometimes yes. And then there you can put a different spin. I mean, every once in a while something changes, but how boring would it be if we just regurgitated the news in a very factual way every week? We add our own spin to it,
Yeah. Our chat room is nerdy, and I love it.
For sure. Well, Daniel's a little nerdy too.
Yeah. Daniel says, I got a DAS. They're talking about servers to store your files. Daniel got a DAS instead of a NAS because the DAS function, and he just goes on. And I was like, I know what a server is. I know the concept of sharing files and such, but I was like, I have no idea the difference between a DAS and a NAS, or sassafras or anything else that rhymes with that. What Dan says, he says, what I've done to get out of a creative rut, take a break, step back, come back the next day or week or month with fresh eyes. Yeah, sometimes that's what it takes. You almost need a chance to miss it, like to kind of refresh. Like, why do I even talk about this? So there we go. Randy's filling me in. DAS is a disk attached storage, where a NAS is network attached storage. There we go. We talk about education on this show. So there we go.
It's just a way of choosing where the data is going to live, right? And how hardware wise, how you're accessing it. And so, you can listen, if you're not with data, if you don't lean towards the technical side, you should go with the easiest possible solution that works for you. Don't get too caught up in the NAS, DAS, cloud. I mean, don't get too caught up in it. Figure out the one that works for you and then use it. Because oftentimes, I had a friend buy a Synology, which is a NAS box. It's its own piece of hardware. You put hard drives in it. You can set up software on it. And so you start using that thing, and then a year later, you're like, I don't even know how to get into it. Like I haven't looked at it. It just works. And that's one of those things. If you're not using them every day, that might be like, now, okay, you got to sit down and figure it out. Or if you're going to buy a piece of hardware like that, you might want to build in some routines to check it on a regular basis, just to know what's going on it. Listen, it becomes another box for you. So you might want to just take it to the cloud. Now that comes with all its own thing. How much data do you have? How much are you putting in the cloud? So just make sure it's easy enough for you. You're not over engineering your backup solution. If you're highly technical, Dan says he loves this Synology. It's a great box, but it's fairly technical, right? It's another operating system that you have to, how do I log into it? How do I use it? How do I set these things up? Can I set it and forget it? Can you? I don't know. It all depends on you. With backup, make sure it's easy for you.
Yeah. I've never heard of Synology.
Synology, yeah, it's a NAS. It's a QNAP, Synology, Drobo used to fit into that before they
remember
went out
Drobo.
of business, right? Yeah. There's just a handful of them left. Although if you go on Amazon, there's like a bunch of them from China that you don't buy those.
Yeah.
Do not buy those.
Speaking of being
They're
spied
spying on you for sure. They are anything. They're spying on you for sure. So yeah, there's a couple. There's just a couple of those left in that space. It's a cool little box, very flexible. Unraid is another one. That's a you can build that yourself.
Yeah.
Unraid. There's a bunch of Linux versions of things you can do. Again, the farther you go down that rabbit hole, the more nerdy they get. Unraid is not an easy setup for most average people. Not an easy setup, and I'm fairly technical, and it's a little bit of a setup for me. So you got to kind of decide. And then the worst part, Dave, on your backup, especially if you decide to host it, if you lose a drive, it's all fun and games storing all these files until you have to figure out, and drives do go bad. They go bad all the time. I follow Backblaze every quarter puts out the number of drives they've bought, then the drives they failed. And they talk because you can get some reliability, and they have hundreds of drives that fail every single quarter. So they do fail. You have to know how to recover that data if you're going to store. This is for most people, the cloud is the way to go, right?
That's what I use. I basically, if I remember, and I've kind of gotten the case now where I save the finished MP3 and I don't care about the other stuff. Now I'm kind of glad I just now started deleting some of that stuff, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I have 930 episodes I need to replace from Libsyn to Captivate, and I still have a version because I have that original file without ads in it. So I can upload that and then dynamically put in my ads, and I'm back to where I was, because when I imported them, the dynamic ads became baked in, and I was like, oh, wait, I think I still have a version. I can go back to the original Hindenburg file, upload it, export it, replace the file, put in a couple, markers, and I'm done. I just get to do it, 900 times. So that's exciting.
It is. I keep raw. I keep the raw version and the finished version.
Yeah.
Right? Both audio and video, because I don't want to remake those.
Yeah.
I used to keep all kinds of different versions, and then I was like, this is dumb. And then I use a Backblaze backup that is cold storage.
Yeah,
so
that's what I use.
I don't pay to put it up there. I pay to store it, which is cheap.
Really cheap.
It's the egress. If you go to get it back,
Yeah.
that's where you pay, right? And I'm in a spot right now where I'm like, if I ever wanted to leave Backblaze, I'd have to pull, because I don't have a local copy. In some cases, I don't have a local copy of it. It's single copy sits, which is bad. This is very bad.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm gonna have to go in and egress some of that data back out, put it somewhere, and do some other things with it. So it's don't make your backup complicated. The more complicated it is, the better chances you have of never getting it again.
Yeah. Here is a name. I just want to say, because we haven't said this forever. It's, we talk about sometimes people leave your show, sometimes they come back, but the one and only Michael Ray is in the chat room.
Oh, hey, Michael.
I was
Omaha guy. Welcome back.
Yeah. He says, although I clicked on show, there we go. I have a 2007 Mac with a Windows keyboard running Mint Linux, 1 terabyte SSD, works well. It's not fast, but it's $150. So you got to love that. And then we had another comment here. There's a lot of value in tangents. This is from when we're talking about going left to center sometimes. I've spent way too much time editing out breaths. Yeah, unless it's Darth Vader, I'm okay with that. 5 years, he said, I just set the noise gate in my software and boom, no more breaths. I haven't tried this, but Mark from Practical Prepping, he's a member of the School of Podcasting, said that just the noise reduction in Hindenburg can remove breaths. And I'm like, I'm going to have to test that. That sounds, because their noise reduction is really good. It's especially if you're just trying to get rid of hiss or whatever, things like that. So I will have to try that. I have a deep breath plugin from Waves, and it's hard to get rid of breaths because I don't know what it is, especially if you're interviewing a female, because obviously their voice is a little higher. And I had it once and it was like 80%. I'm like, just taking them out. It's perfect. And then there was one towards the end where whatever she said was in the range of what sound, where whatever looks like a breath. And all of a sudden half the word went out the window. And I was like, eh. And then I was like, wait a minute, let's make this a little less aggressive. And then all the breaths were back. And I was like, I haven't found that official, a noise gate sometimes can work, but yeah, they're all kind of tricky like that.
Dave, one of the things that annoys me the most about you is when I hear you breathing, which is all the time, by the way. This is just, I'm joking, of course, but I think sometimes, and maybe it accentuates because of some processing we've done on our podcasts, but yeah. By the way, you listen to people breathe all the time and you don't know it because you ignore it.
Yeah.
And most people do as well. So I wouldn't stress about breathing on a podcast unless it's just horrific. And then maybe there's an audio problem and not a breathing problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, these, compressors, Auphonic, if your breath is loud enough that Auphonic thinks it's a word, forget it. You've just made your audio worse. So that's why I never overwrite an original file. Like I always keep the original one, and then sometimes I'll make a copy of it and then do all my song and dance stuff on that, so that in the event I end up with something that's just horrendous, I'm like, wait, hold on, I can go back to the beginning where I started from. So
you know who doesn't breathe? AI. They don't breathe.
Although I've heard they're making them breathe. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy that we're adding, because it doesn't sound authentic, so we're adding breathing back in to make it sound more authentic. I don't get it.
I started using, in fact, I'm glad I remembered this because, I started using wondercraft.ai. I'll have the link out in the show notes because, of course, they have an affiliate program. Doesn't everybody? But what it is, it's part 11 Labs. 11 Labs is a partner. And then they've got some sort of, big language thing in the background. And you basically say, I need an ad for the School of Podcasting, which is a podcast about blah, 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 yada, yada. And it spits out an ad. And then you can pick out all these voices. And the one, I don't know if I share audio on this, it probably wouldn't hear it. But anyway, there was like a total, just announcer guy who's very forceful and he's talking like this, the School of Podcasting. And I was like, he sounds, it was weird because on one hand, I'm like, is that AI? And I'm like, no, that sounds like an annoying radio guy. And so I used him on my last episode, but you could actually have different voices in the same read. And so what I liked about it is it's meant to it's, how you have the Cast Magic and the Cap shows. This is designed to write ads. So they really have that AI tuned for that. And then you can pull in music. I was not overly impressed with their music. So I basically had it read the ad and then I put my own music in later. But it was interesting. So the AI, but that's the thing is, as I was doing this, I forget there was one, and I heard where the AI person actually took a breath. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. They're breathing now. So, and it is getting spooky. Ralph from the Ask Ralph podcast sent me something. He goes, Dave, I finally cloned my voice in 11 Labs. And he goes, it's kind of spooky. And he sent it to me, and it was very spooky. Had he not told me this was AI, I would have thought it was Ralph. So if you haven't, it's a weird conversation to have with your family. But if you're a podcaster, and most of us, here today are, you got to come up with a safe word in the event somebody captures me and they call my brother and say, we need $5,000 in iTunes gift cards. I have to tell my family it's whatever, upside down, pumpernickel, some sort of phrase, so that if they go, well, what's the phrase, Dave? And they don't know it, then they know it's artificial. And I was like, really? And there were people like, no, that's a thing. Like, you need to, and not so much even if you get kidnapped, but if you're on vacation or something like that, and they're like, I have him now, I will kill him. Like, don't call his phone, or I will, if his phone rings, I have a gun to his head. I need $10,000, so you need, Chris calls it a deep fake safe word. So it's,
just don't make it bananas or something like that, because they'll know.
Yeah, don't make it password.
It's got to be, it's got to be.
Don't make your safe word in the same way that, and don't hide your safe word under the keyboard, because everybody knows that's where you store it. Yeah. Daniel says, or instead of a safe word, I've told my family to call me back on my phone number or a number they know will reach me if they suspect it's not me. So, and then Randy Black said, did anybody see folks uploading Joe Biden's phone call from the other day to 11 Labs to check if it was generated by them? Interesting. I did not hear about that. But I'm as soon as we get closer to November, it's going to get ugly with this stuff. Because on one hand, you'll be like, well, the actual Democratic Party or the Republican, like, they're not. Well, sure, they're not. But it's the people, on both sides that, Chris says, yeah.
Go ahead, read that.
I got a cold call from what I thought was a bot. I asked, in this case, quotation marks, her, what she had for dinner. And yep, she was not real. Yeah, I've done that.
We at Gallup have an interview to get hired. You have to go through this interview, and these interviewers ask these questions, and they're real people like doing this, but they've done it so many times. They sound like bots. Talk about no breathing. You don't, I mean, it's crazy. So during the interview, this was, I just celebrated 17 years at Gallup. So this was 17 years ago. I was going through the interview, and I could have swore it was a recording. So I just stopped talking. I was, so there's this blank space, not the Taylor Swift song, but there's this blank space. And she goes, "Are you there?" And I was like, oh, sorry. I just got distracted for a minute. I just was trying to figure out if it was, but yeah, we're going into some spaces where it'll be interesting to see how these voices play out. I'm interested, like in Ralph's case, what his use case for having that voice is going to be. Would it, like I would think, would it make sense for me to record a podcast, then have an editor go through the transcript and fix all the times I had bad English, or I didn't say things right, or I didn't finish sentences? I'm notorious for that. I interrupt myself. Would I fix the transcript and then replay the transcript with my voice, and then that would be the produced podcast, so that it would be still me, it's still my words, they're just edited? Like, is that the next level of editing, Dave, where I could edit me perfectly in the podcast, not have to do these gyrations of bad audio or jump cut video or some of those kinds of things, and then have it and then produce the edited version that way with an AI voice, if you can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know. I think it's just going to be weird. It's going to be tricky. Randy says I use 11 Labs to generate scripture readings for new biblical podcasts. Yeah, I think James Cridlin did that for a while. If it's a press release or something like that, and what he always does, I forget what it is. I don't think he says I'm not real, but it's something like voice was, and it's not AI, but he has to like say that's not the real person that said that.
If I did that, if I wrote something and if I said it and I edited it and then I had my voice re-say it, do I need to disclose that's an AI voice?
Yeah, I don't know. And Randy says Jesus sounds a lot like Sam Elliott. Blessed are those that are meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Yeah, that'd be
beef. It's what's for dinner.
Well, I thought I was going to have to use it. I recorded a conversation with my new boss for Monday's episode, and we thought he said my title wrong. And then I went back and listened, and the good news is he didn't say my title at all. But I thought if I need to, with his permission, I will clone my boss and just have him say this one word again and then go that route. So, yeah, so that's, I can see where, and I'm trying to wrap my head around this because Ralph's podcast is short. It is video. So that's where, that's not going to, well, you can do AI videos, by the way. If you haven't seen those yet, those are equally spooky. You basically talk into a camera, don't move your arms and hands, but your arms and hands have to be in the screen so they don't give you 12 fingers. And then they make a video of you. Yeah. And then Chris says, what's your new boss's name again?
Who is it? What?
Yeah.
Who?
We should have made a poll today.
When are you disclosing this again? I don't know, by the way. Dave is not, he's even kept it a secret from me.
Now the new boss was, not being mean about it, but he was just like, yeah, same as the old boss. No. Thank God. They wanted this big reveal, and I'm like, okay. So I feel like LeBron James, I'm taking my talents to blah blah blah. So
if I wanted to be one of the first to know what's going on next Monday, where would I?
Well, here's the thing. Normally, the School of Podcasting is published at 12:05 a.m. on Monday, so it's basically Sunday night, and it's being slightly postponed till about 7:30 a.m.
Okay.
Because and to me, look, I'm just going, like, I just changed jobs. Like, it's not that big a deal. And the hoopla over this.
It's a big deal. Why not make it a big deal? It's fun. So I could subscribe to your podcast and you're going to say it there, like 7 a.m. Central or 7 a.m. Eastern or what?
8. It'd be 7:30 would be my guess, is where I probably am going to post it. And then you'll sit through the fun-filled story of Dave.
Okay.
And then at the end, I will say, and
is there a news source that might have it before?
There is a news source that will hear it actually before me. That's one of the things we had to negotiate.
Can you disclose?
Yeah, it'll be in Pod News. You'll hear on. So if you don't want to get a spoiler for the School of Podcasting, don't listen to Pod News for that day. Of course, you always want to listen to Pod News, but not that day. And then you'll hear me shortly after he reveals. I will reveal. So that's
who does Pod News again?
Some guy named James something. No, James Cridlin. Yeah.
Cridlin. Never heard of him.
Yeah. DR has a question going back to our kind of previous subject here. Do you save all your old episodes? They are already saved in all the players. I'm thinking of that. Why should I save old episodes? For my clients, I don't. I say that up front. I'm like, here they are. Here's yours. Throw them in your Dropbox. I don't need them. I don't save that. But holy cow, look who's back. Look who's back. We talked about this earlier. The one and only Bang's Naughty Bits.
Nicely done.
Request
that's a
for detailed
blast
review of
from the past.
podcast trailer, links, all politics, and I wasn't invited. Yeah. But thank you for the super cash. And Bangs, I sent you a message on Reddit. Now that I'm not the head of podcaster education at Libsyn, do I still have to do the disclaimer? Because it says moderator mandatory. I am the head of podcaster education at Libsyn and the founder of the School of Podcasting. And now that I'm just the founder of the School of Podcasting, do I still need to disclose that in my Reddit post? Because if I didn't, it was slammed every time. They're like, nope.
Maybe it would help if we knew your title on Monday. What?
Yeah.
Don't say.
Yeah, I can't say that.
Don't say. You looked for a second like you were gonna say it. I'm like, don't.
And I'm like, can I? I'm like, nah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Nah. Well, I can't say. The title doesn't really give away where I'm working. But,
okay.
So, but
anyway, don't say it. Keep us in suspense.
Yeah, it's.
I
tell you,
you talk about. I had you.
Yeah, you talk. Well, it's Chris is saying Dave was hired by Logitech to bring out a new version of the Blue Yeti. Yes, it's called the Podcast Hero. Yeah. This is a popular guess. DR's like, I thought you were going to Captivate.
Yep. I've heard that.
But I've also, the reason I changed, and again, there's nothing wrong with Libsyn. The reason I moved the School of Podcasting to Captivate, dynamic ad insertion. The reason I moved Ask the Podcast Coach to dynamic ad insertion, or to Buzzsprout, is their dynamic tool. And Libsyn has a dynamic tool. It's called Libsyn Pro. And oh my God, is it expensive compared to the competition? And I have told them that multiple times. I'm like, we need one for Joe Entrepreneur. And maybe they're working on one, but there sure wasn't one when I was there. So it is what it is. But Jim, holy cow. That went, I don't know about you. I thought that went fast today.
Yeah, it's fun.
It seems like a week ago we were talking about Bon Jovi, and I was like,
fun episode.
Yeah. What is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
On Home Gadget Geeks, Mark Robson joins me. He is our barbecue grill and smoker expert. Every summer we do summer here in the United States. Every summer we do a big show on grilling and smoking. We show pictures. It will make you hungry. So if you want to catch up on all the things that we're doing, I posted it just before this show. Head out to theaverageguy.tv, or you can get it at homegadgetgeeks.com.
Yeah, Daniel is guessing all the places I would never work in a million years. Dave is working for SoundCloud. Dave is working for YouTube.
Anchor, for sure.
Anchor, that's it. Dave was hired by a professional podcast promoter. Yes. That's right. People go, why aren't you on LinkedIn more? I'm like, because
Rogan hired you? Is that what I heard?
That would be nice.
You're going to be on Rogan's podcast production crew?
Yeah. Let's see. My top 3 candidates. He says Captivate, Podcast Movement. That would be interesting. And Blueberry. Anyway, so I can neither confirm nor deny, of course. And schoolofpodcasting.com/follow, which is what this week's episode is about. But I'm kind of tired of talking about me, but it is interesting because last week was like, hey, I started with a Shure SM58 in the basement, and now I'm using this microphone, and how I kind of got from there to here. And it's weird seeing how many times I met somebody way back in the day, and now like 5 years later, oh, that person and I worked for a bit, and that led me to this. So it's all about the relationships of podcasting. And Bangs is coming in with another thingy here. Thank you, sir. You have no idea. Podcast Coach covers a lot of territory. I disclaimer everything. Bangs' disclosure is yes, I am an a-hole. So, hey, thanks. We will see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.